Sarasota County Court of Common Pleas is again in session. The Honorable Christine Croce presiding.
Thank you. You may be seated. Joe, Mr. Gorman, you may proceed. Yes. Yep, you're up.
I'm about to get relaxed.
And Detective Looney, you're still under oath.
Yes, sure.
Sorry, Judge, just getting situated.
That's all right.
Good afternoon, Detective Looney.
Good afternoon.
Oh, you know what? Hold on. I shut the mics off. There we go.
Good afternoon.
All right, I'll start again. Good afternoon, Detective Looney.
Good afternoon.
Detective, I think the last topic we talked about, if I'm not mistaken, was Patrick Boggs and the information you received from the Portage County Sheriff's Department about Mr. Boggs' interaction with an inmate, Selby, correct?
That's correct.
And I think I said, based on that information you had about his past, as it relates to Angela Boggs, that made him a suspect in this case. Fair?
That's fair, yes.
Okay. I'm going to talk to you about Circle K. And I left something over here. There we go. Do you remember when Detective Stewart was talking about Circle K?
Yes.
All right. I think you provided us over the break. She had some case notes too, and then I think you provided both sides some case notes that you had that kind of gave a little bit of a timeline to some of the main things you did, or some of the things you did in your investigation, correct?
Correct.
And you have those with you?
Yes, I do.
All right, there's a reference here, and I got to find it because it's 6 pages long, but there's a reference here to securing Circle K video, I believe. You recall that?
I have to take a look.
All right.
Yes, I do. I see it on page 3.
Page
what will be 3 at the top.
Thank you. So it's a to-do list, I think, and on May 16th of 2017, one of the things I believe at that time you wanted to accomplish was to follow up a Circle K surveillance video. You see that?
Yes, it's actually 517 in that section.
Okay, 517 it happened?
Yes.
All right. So on 517, when we're talking about that Circle K video, are we talking about Circle K video now from the 2016 house fire or the 2017 house fire?
I believe it was part of the to-do list was for both. We were still looking at both years, both fires that occurred.
If you know, had you gotten Circle K video prior to May of 2017 as it relates to the Lindell Lewis 719 Fultz fire?
I myself did not, but I believe it was assigned, and there was a video recovered during Detective Stewart's investigation.
Okay. All right. Did that video then go all the way back a year?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So the video that you're after then in May of 2017 would most likely have been video about cars coming and going around Circle K around the time of the May 2017 fire. Is that fair?
That's fair, but it could have been both still.
Okay. They didn't have it on a loop there like we've heard that video gets it plays over itself after a certain amount of time, after 30 days normally.
I'm not sure what their retention period is, but typically we recover video through a contact at Circle K.
Okay.
And they deliver it to us.
And I think you told us this morning that the DVR that would go back further in time for the video, the DVR system for Circle K was never taken by the Akron Police Department. Is that fair?
I believe Circle K may have a different format. Sometimes it's cloud-based. It may not be an actual hard drive, but it could be remote.
Do you know that for a fact, or are you?
I don't know that. I don't know that for a fact, but I do know that when we request video, it's given to us by the corporate contact person.
Okay. Did you review in this case in May of 2017 any video from Circle K that you recall?
Not that I recall, but again, I did look at both years, 2016 and 2017, during my investigation as well.
Okay. Do you remember when I interviewed Detective Stewart, I had put some pictures of guys getting out of that truck at Circle K?
Yes, I do.
Did you go and look to see whether those same individuals were getting out of trucks around the time of the May 7, 2017 house fire?
Yes, we looked at the 2017 video
Okay.
to see if there were vehicles moving and any individuals in the area.
Is there anywhere in your report of investigation that reflects that you did that?
I'd have to take a look at my action taken. But there's, again, the report of investigation is a summary of the investigation. It is not all encompassing, just as this list here as well says it is a brief overview, a summary, not all inclusive.
Okay. Who are the two gentlemen that are in the video at the Circle K that we saw through Detective Stewart?
I don't have their identities.
Okay. During the course of your investigation, did you get information about potentially one of their identities?
I believe we did identify a gentleman. I don't have that with me
Okay.
to recall the name.
All right, and that would have been much later, maybe last year?
That's correct.
All right. What's that gentleman's name?
I don't recall the gentleman's name right now.
Did you ever speak to that gentleman that you identified?
No, I did attempt to make phone calls to a number or contact number that we had, but there was no response.
Okay, so you had a name for that person, correct?
I believe an alleged name.
Okay,
I don't recall that right now.
Okay. But whoever that was in that video, there's never been contact made with anybody to ask them where they were either during the 2016 house fire or the 2017 house fire, correct?
We attempted to contact them. We did not speak with anyone.
Okay. But you had a name and you went to a residence, correct? I'll get it for you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You did have a name and you went to a residence, and I think you had some conversation with this individual's mother, correct?
I'm not sure which residence you're referring to.
Well, did you go out looking for that individual?
Yes. We
Right.
did another canvass of that entire neighborhood.
But when you went out, did you go out looking for that individual and go to that a house where you thought he may have been, and were confronted by his mother and his dog telling you to stay off the property?
I don't recall. I'd have to see my report.
Okay.
That's in my report.
All right, and maybe it wasn't you. The point is, you never spoke to the individual that you identified. Is that fair?
That's correct. That was identified, but I did attempt to reach out to
I understand.
someone. Yes.
But you never made, you never crossed the goal line with it. You
That's
never
correct.
talked to that person, correct?
That's correct.
And the other individual that was in that car remains unknown to you. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And when I talk about that in the Circle K, I just want to make sure I'm clear. It's the truck that, through the video surveillance at 719 Fultz or 714 Fultz and at Circle K, that we've identified, at least in 2016, as being in the neighborhood during the time or around the time of the commission of the fire at 719 Fultz, correct?
That's correct.
We heard from Miss Gary about an Anthony in the neighborhood who lived on Russell, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you point to where Russell is on the map there at Exhibit 13 for us?
Yes, Russell Avenue is right here on the bottom of the board.
Okay. And he lived down on that street, correct?
According to Ms. Gary, yes.
Okay. And he was the self-proclaimed biggest drug dealer in town, correct?
According to Ms. Gary, yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Did you ever interview him about his whereabouts as it relates to the house fire in 2016 on Fultz, at 719 Fultz, or the house fire as it relates to 693 Fultz?
No, I never talked with Anthony.
Okay. Anthony was the owner or lived in the house, tell me if I'm wrong, with the woman who came in here to testify about the 2017 car fire, correct?
I have no knowledge of her occupants. I believe it was her and her son when I spoke with them.
Okay. You don't know if her live-in boyfriend or husband was Anthony?
I do not know.
Okay. As it relates to Thomas Hughley and Ronald Garrett, we heard through testimony in this case that they were addicted to drugs, correct?
I'm not. We have heard that, yes.
Okay.
But I never spoke with them myself.
Okay. Well, we heard it. It came out that Gregory Lewis had told Tanisha Stewart that, correct?
Correct.
And we heard from other people, or we heard from Gregory Lewis that those guys owed drug dealers money and there was confrontation at the house. Do you remember that?
I'm not familiar with Gregory Lewis speaking, but there were other individuals.
Tanisha Stewart told us from the stand that she interviewed Gregory Lewis. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
And Gregory Lewis said you might want to look at the drug dealers that Thomas Hughley and Thomas Garrett utilized because they were mad at Thomas Hughley and Garrett because those guys didn't pay for their drugs and there was confrontation at 719 Fultz. Do you recall that?
I do recall it, yes.
Okay. After the May of 2017 fire, did you ever re-interview Thomas Hughley or Ronald Garrett to ask them about who those folks that were so mad at them for not paying for drugs were?
I did not, no.
I believe in June of 2017, I think you've testified to this on direct examination, that you and Detective Tanisha Stewart went to speak with Stanley O. Mitchell about his potential involvement in this case. Do you remember that?
I do remember the interview, yes.
Okay. And would you agree with me, Detective, that that happened in June of 2017?
I agree with you, yes.
Okay. And if we looked at your report, it'd give us an exact date, correct?
Yes.
Do you mind telling us?
Sure. Page 75, and that interview was done June 7th, 2017, 10:40 a.m. at 849 Baruta Street in Akron.
Okay. And at the time of that interview, you had already reviewed the videotapes that we have shown to this jury about moving figures and things of that nature at the time of the fires, correct?
That's correct.
And going back to 2016, well, let me ask this question. You heard me cross-examine Detective Stewart about what was in her report of investigation, correct?
Correct, yes.
And in 2016, when she created that report, first of all, that truck that we know went to Circle K, that certainly caught her attention, correct?
Correct.
And then there was a truck where she was kind of unclear whether it was a second truck or if it was the same truck with the white stripe that had turned around at Hillcrest and Fultz right after the second attempt on the fire, correct? Or the second attempt on the house, correct?
Correct.
She was unclear about whether that was the same truck as the one we saw at the Circle K video that was also in the neighborhood that night, correct?
I believe so, correct.
You had an interest in Mr. Stanley O. Mitchell because he drives a truck, is that fair?
And that's the son of Mr. Ford as well.
Yes. So you had an interview with him and you talked to him about his truck, correct?
That's correct.
You were interested in that interview about when he had purchased it and things of that nature, correct?
That's correct.
You had learned, and I think you testified on direct examination, that he may also have access to 1370 and 1374 Hillcrest with the key cards, correct?
Correct.
So that piqued your interest, correct?
That's correct, yes.
You went and discussed with him his whereabouts that night, correct?
That's correct.
During the course of your investigation, you learned that he worked at McDonald's, correct?
That's correct.
And that he was working at McDonald's on August 18th of 2016, is that fair?
That's fair.
And you learned that his shift started at 4 a.m., correct?
That's correct.
And I think the last successful attempt of the fire was sometime around 3:45-ish, is that fair?
That's fair.
You probably know, detective, from being a detective in this community, that you can get from that neighborhood that's in question here, Fultz, Hillcrest, to that location at Wolf Ledges in about 6 to 8 minutes, correct?
That's fair, yes.
It's pretty easy to get there. You jump on 76, you go east, and it's like the next first or second exit afterward, correct?
That's correct.
You then verify that in fact he was out and about that night by finding his phone records and finding that, or not his phone records, his login records at work, and finding he actually clocked in at 4:02 a.m. Is that fair?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. But for all the reasons you stated, the truck, the fact that he was Mr. Ford's son, the fact that you learned that he was actually out and about that night, correct?
Correct.
And the fact that he potentially had access to those homes made him somebody of interest to you. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. You asked for his cell phone that night, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And he gave you his cell phone. You can look at your report if you want. I believe it's in there, if I'm not mistaken. No, you know what? It might be in there. It might be in the recording. You recorded the interview, correct?
Yes, yes, we did.
Well, I could ask this question then. You can look if you want to.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any information about the cell phone here, but it could have gone to the recording.
Okay. Let me ask it this way then. Did you at any time take a cell phone from Stanley O. Mitchell, and did you ever do a phone extraction of it to your knowledge?
I don't recall.
Okay. So if I put up on the board interviews with Circle K, with the people in the truck at Circle K, you would say you did not interview them, correct?
That's correct. We attempted to.
Right, I understand.
Yes.
But you did not interview them.
That's correct.
If I said that I put up Anthony, and I'll put next to him drug dealer because that's how he's been portrayed at least, you did not interview him.
That's correct.
If I said any of the drug dealers utilized by Thomas Hughley or Ronald Garrett, you did not interview them. Is that fair?
I have no knowledge of their dealers.
Nor did you interview Thomas Hughley or Ronald Garrett to ask them who they were, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and then, but the one person that you did interview that you found to be a potential suspect would be Stanley O. Mitchell. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. So if I jotted those things down, I'm not saying you agree or disagree with why you did or didn't do them, but those things that I just said about those folks would be accurate. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Okay. Detective, do you recall Beverly Ewing testifying in this case?
Yes.
And we asked, both the prosecutor and I both asked her about both fires. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And Beverly Ewing was asked about, by me, a suspicious black vehicle that was in the neighborhood prior to the fire at 693 Fultz, correct?
Correct.
And she said that that suspicious black vehicle parked many times up on Hillcrest, right near Chester Williams' house, correct?
That's correct.
And if you could point out where that would be on the map.
Chester Williams, or where the vehicle?
Where she described the vehicle as being.
Well, Mr. Williams' house is right here, 714.
Okay.
And I believe she mentioned the vehicle was parked somewhere in the vicinity here, in the block radius.
I think she set up at Chester Williams' house, didn't she?
I don't.
Okay,
okay.
so, ladies and gentlemen, you'll rely on your collective memories as to what Ms. Ewing's testimony was.
That suspicious black vehicle, she told the jury, was in that neighborhood several times, not nightly, but many times in the period leading up to the fire. Do you remember that?
That's correct.
And she testified that that individual, after the fire, parked up there by Chester Williams' house, got out of his car. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And she said that was the first time that that individual had ever gotten out of the car to her knowledge, correct?
That's correct.
That prior to that, he would park up there between 9 and 10 p.m. approximately and never get out of the car, the best she knew, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, you may. All right. Okay.
You may proceed, Mr. Gorman.
Okay. So the detective, the question over at sidebar is, am I accurate in saying outside of Chester Williams' house, or was it down more towards the Wright's house or in her house? Nevertheless, wherever it was, she witnessed that car doing that on Hillcrest, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And she talked, is that good, Judge?
So this is why
You have to rely on your collective memories, because you may hear something different. And so what Mr. Gorman thinks, Ms. Wright testified, that his question is not evidence. It's what your collective memories are about Rebecca Wright's testimony. All right? Even his answer. Even if his answer is different, whatever she testified to and the credibility and the amount of evidence or credence you want to give to that testimony, that's your responsibility. All right? Okay. And for the record, no one's doing it intentionally. This is now day 11, right? We've heard a lot of evidence, and it's just everyone's on high alert.
I appreciate it, Judge. I'm just trying to focus on not exactly which car or house it was in front of, but it was on Hillcrest, and you recall the testimony, correct?
That's correct.
And you recall her testimony that after the fire, there was all kinds of fire trucks out there, right?
Yes,
We had a burned up house, correct?
that's correct.
And I asked her, it was pretty obvious that a big major fire happened in the neighborhood, correct?
Correct.
And this individual who she described as a black man got out of his vehicle that day, correct?
That's correct.
And he was, I'm sorry,
That's correct.
okay. And he was conversing with some of the people that were standing in the street, correct?
That's correct.
She heard that conversation, correct?
Yes,
And he got out with a big smile on his face, if you recall, correct?
that's correct.
And indicated or asked, almost sarcastically, did somebody get shot?
That's correct.
And then made a derogatory comment about black people hurting other black people or committing crimes against other black people, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So, when you interviewed Stanley Ford, and we listened to your tape, Stanley Ford on May 18th, or 17th or 18th, also brought up to your attention that there was a suspicious black car in the neighborhood, did he not?
I believe so, yes.
And that was in the recording that was played by the prosecutors yesterday, correct?
Correct.
And in that, he said there was a suspicious black vehicle that was driving without its lights on, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And he told you he called Akron police about that, correct?
I believe so, yes.
You'll be on H. Am I right, Tim?
Yes.
Thank you, Judge.
Oh, I didn't really say that, I was just making sure I didn't.
So in May of 2017, you have heard from Miss Ewing talking about the suspicious vehicle, correct, and what she observed, right?
Yes.
You have also interviewed Mr. Ford, and you have heard about the suspicious vehicle from Mr. Ford as well, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to hand you what's been previously marked for purposes of identification as Defendant's Exhibit H, and I'm going to ask you to take a look at it, and if you can, describe what it is you're looking at for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Okay. Okay, this is an incident or actual call, it appears made to the police department from 13's address is 1374 Hillcrest on April 13, 2017, 21:44 hours and 9:44 p.m. Reporting a black Buick Ohio license plate George David George 6783. The notes say dark black older model vehicle driving with lights out. Now back and parked on the street, vehicles across from this location or this 31 location.
Okay, across from the location, that would be across from 1374 Hillcrest, correct?
That's correct.
So, can you point to the map on Exhibit 13, Detective, and tell us where that report suggests this vehicle is parked?
Yes, this is 1374 Hillcrest. They're suggesting the vehicle's parked across from that location.
Okay. And the call came in, we have on this report, from 1374 Hillcrest, correct?
It actually says anonymous for a complaint name.
Why do we have an address of 1374 Hillcrest?
That could be the reported address when they ask where from creating the call, but it says anonymous for complaint name.
Okay, so an anonymous name, but in May of 2017, you've interviewed Stanley Ford, correct?
Correct.
And he indicated to you that he had called in about a suspicious black car with no lights on, parked out there, correct?
Correct.
So using your detective skills and powers of deduction, it would seem to be that that phone call came from Stanley Ford, huh?
It appears it came from 1374 Hillcrest, yes.
Okay. Second, you would agree that this is a record kept in the ordinary business by the Akron Police Department?
Yes, yes it is.
Okay, and provided, as you would look, as the lead detective, provided to the state and defense in the discovery process, correct?
Yes.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
You may. I'll
If I knew how to, I would.
Look at that.
Thank you, Judge. So
No,
Detective,
I don't know how to zoom in, so you're gonna.
Scott will help me.
How's that? Good enough?
Yeah, that's good. Detective, I've put on the overhead now for the jury's view, Defendant's Exhibit H. That's the document I just had handed you, correct?
That's correct.
Are you able, Detective, to tell us who the owner of that black vehicle is?
I don't see the owner information here. There's a license plate, a vehicle tag at least registered.
Yes.
That was reported.
Did you look at that vehicle tag and run it to find out who was the owner?
I don't recall. We may have. I don't recall. Otherwise, I'd have that information.
Pardon?
I don't recall us running the tag. Someone else could have during the investigation.
Well, as you sit here today on the stand as the lead detective in this case, are you able to tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury who purchased or who received that tag from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles?
I do not have that information.
Okay. Detective, how many interviews, they get a little confusing, how many interviews did you conduct of Stanley Ford?
I believe there were actually 3 or 4. The first initial one we heard was one. The first 2 was one initial contact. We stepped outside, I stopped the recorder, went back in. So that would still be one interview. The second, we came back in an hour, and the third was in the vehicle, my DB car, and the fourth was at the station.
Okay. I guess for lack of a better term, the 2 main interviews then would have been May 2018 in your DB vehicle, correct?
Yes, that was the first one. Yes.
On Hillcrest, correct?
That's correct.
And that one lasted about an hour and a half, correct?
That's correct.
And that's the one we have only the audio from because you are in a vehicle.
That's correct.
All right. And then the second main one, we heard a little bit of that today. That would have been an interview that lasted approximately 3.5 hours. Does that sound right?
He was at the station for about 3.5 hours. So
Okay.
The interview was a little bit shorter.
Okay.
Yes.
Not holding you to it, if you had to guesstimate, how long would that interview have taken place for?
A little over 2 hours.
Okay. And that's the one where we see him handcuffed to the table, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And we have the audio and video of that.
Yes.
Okay. As a detective in the Akron Police Department, based on your training and experience and your on-the-job training and any classes you may have taken, you learn how to try and interview individuals, don't you?
Yes.
All right. Detective, if I recall, your educational background is you have a doctorate, did you say?
Yes, I do.
What's your doctorate in?
Business management, organizational management, and leadership.
Okay. And if you get a doctorate, in my mind, you have to have a master's too?
Yes.
And what's that in?
Internet marketing,
All right. And then your bachelor would be in what?
business and marketing.
So you're a very educated man, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you aware of Stanley Ford's background?
Partly, yes.
All right. And his educational background?
Education I'm not familiar with, but we did talk.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. You're welcome. You may proceed, Mr. Gorman.
Thank you, Judge. Detective, part of your,
Hey, do me a favor, I think the top of this is leaning against the speaker.
I think it is, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
It's right here.
I apologize.
No, it's not your fault. Go ahead.
Detective, you are trained to interview potential suspects and utilize a method that's called the Reed technique, aren't you?
I didn't take the Reed course, but I did have investigative courses, yes. I think I actually had one course in Reed,
Well,
a partial, yes.
a partial course in Reed?
Yes.
You know what Reed is, correct?
I do, I'm very familiar, yes.
Okay. In fact, some of the tactics you utilized in your investigation with Mr. Ford utilized some Reed techniques, correct?
That's correct.
And if you could, then just tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when we talk about the Reed, and I don't mean R-E-A-D, you know I mean R-E-I-D,
That's correct.
the Reed technique, in general, what that is.
Typically, when we interview parties, witnesses, suspects, and so forth, you pretty much want to have a conversation with that person or individual. You want to build a rapport with them, and then maybe give them themes based upon how your conversation or interview is going. Once you obviously build a rapport, have the conversation, then with known facts or evidence, you confront them with the reason you're talking with them, if they're a suspect, and basically obtain a statement from them.
And there are psychological components to the Reed technique to get someone to talk, correct?
I would say investigative, but
Okay. There are investigative techniques, then, we'll use your word,
Yes.
in order to get somebody to talk, correct?
yes,
Okay, and that's part of the Reed technique, correct?
yes, we're having a conversation. Yes,
Right.
we'd like to.
Well, let's I guess talk about this. The May 2018 interview that happens in the car. Okay?
Yes,
You tell Mr. Ford during that interview, if it's not already apparent to him sitting there, that hey, there are detectives here from the Akron Police Department, right?
yes,
There are people here from the Fire Marshal's office, correct?
yes,
There are people from the crime scene unit, correct?
that's correct.
And if I didn't already say it, there are people from the Akron Fire Department, correct?
That's correct.
There are drug dogs, correct? Or not drug dogs, excuse me, accelerant dogs, correct?
Correct.
You're painting a picture to him as part of your process that we're on top of this, correct?
Yes, it's a collaborative effort. Yes,
Okay. And he's witnessing it unfold before his own eyes, isn't he?
yes,
Okay. That's part of the reason you interview him right there, isn't it?
actually, yes and no.
Okay?
Yes, because he was willing to talk at the time. No, because we would prefer him coming downtown, but he refused to do so.
Okay.
So we'll talk wherever we have to talk to parties.
And you're also trying to create a high-pressure environment at that moment, aren't you?
No, sir.
No?
We purposely put him in the front seat. Doors were unlocked. He was free to leave at any moment.
All right. And Johnny Bell walked him there. How did that happen?
He was talking. He knew Detective Bell was talking with him, and as I mentioned, we'd like to interview him. I walked towards my DB car and unlocked the car. He was talking with Detective Bell and walking to the car with him.
Okay. So Detective Bell, during that interview, then comes over, though. You say he's not under arrest, correct?
I never said that, but he was not under arrest.
Okay. And says, hey, I need your keys to move your truck, correct?
I do recall, yes. Someone came up for the keys.
And Stanley, that was Detective Bell in the interview, correct?
Yes, it was. Yes,
Okay.
It was.
And Mr. Ford indicated, I'll move my own truck, correct?
That's correct.
And he wasn't allowed to do that, correct?
That's correct.
So he wasn't under arrest, but he wasn't allowed to move his own truck, correct?
Yes, obviously safety reasons.
Okay. You didn't tell him it was for safety reasons, though, did you?
I didn't have to. He was talking with Detective Bell.
Well, Detective Bell didn't tell him that either, did he?
He did not.
So he's in the cruiser, sitting in the front passenger seat, you're sitting in the driver's seat.
That's correct.
Do you tell him it's being recorded?
I believe I pulled my recorder out, set it around the dash in front of both of us.
Okay. and then you tell him, hey, I gotta read you your Miranda rights, correct?
That's correct.
And you said that's because I do that all the time, I wanna stay consistent. You remember
That's
telling him
correct.
that?
Yes,
But the day before, you didn't read him his Miranda rights, did you?
I did not.
So it really wasn't about being consistent, it was about any concern that he would be considered to be in custody in that moment, correct?
It was a formal interview, yes, at that time.
All right,
yes.
and you know as a detective, if it's considered to be in custody or deprived of your freedom, you gotta Mirandize them for the statement to become admissible, correct?
That's fair, yes.
So that's the reason, really, you're reading them the rights at that point. You wanna make sure that statement's coming in, right?
Yes,
All right, so the consistency thing isn't actually the reason, is it?
it's a part of it still, because if we had been at the station like as we were, I read Miranda there as well. Yes.
Well, he was in custody clearly at that time, right?
He was at that time, and I still, yes.
And you know
twice.
as a detective, if he's clearly in custody, you gotta Mirandize him, right?
Yes,
And you know, detective, that when you talk to him about, you just say, hey, I gotta do this, man, because I gotta remain consistent kind of talk. You're doing that so his red flags don't go up when you read him the Miranda warnings, right?
not necessarily red flags, but I wanted to make sure it was very clear on tape as well. He was advised of his rights. I even stopped him from talking. She said, no, let's do this. If you want to talk, let me read them again, to be very clear.
Right.
Yes.
Here's the point is, when you start talking about, I just gotta do this to remain consistent, that's not exactly, and I'm not suggesting it's wrong of a police department, but that's not exactly genuine, correct?
It is genuine because I wanted to make sure he was aware if he wanted to talk with us, I would advise him of his rights, or if he wanted counsel, we wouldn't talk.
Well, you didn't do that the day before.
The initial contact with Mr. Ford?
Yes.
No, we did not read Miranda then. We were just trying to make contact with him.
Well, you were talking to him about the case, though.
We were talking about the case, yes, and his wife calling, yes.
Right.
But we wanted him to come downtown.
Part of the read technique is to initially try and provide a comfort level, correct?
Yes.
Try and befriend the person you're talking to, correct?
We want to build a rapport, yes.
Yeah, building a rapport,
Yes.
right? You're trying to get them to confess. That's your goal, correct?
To have a conversation and talk with us, yes.
In this case, you were trying to get Mr. Ford to say he went down to set the fire, were you not?
Yes.
Okay. You don't provide him at the time the evidence that you have, do you? You just talk about it.
Some of the evidence was mentioned.
You don't talk about, you talk about what you saw, but you don't
That's
show
correct.
him, you never showed him the video, correct?
That's correct. No, we weren't able to inside the car.
All right, how about in 2000, or May 23rd, 2017, when you have him in there for the 2 hours and some minutes, whatever you and Johnny Bell are talking to him, do you show him the video?
We did not at that time. There was
No.
we didn't have a video system in that room, and no, we did not.
Right, so he wasn't provided the video to look at before he made his statement, correct?
That's correct.
He was told, though, in that video by Detective Bell, we see you walking down the street, right?
That's correct.
As if, you don't tell him, hey, there's a grainy video of a figure that we can't really make out. We're told, we see you walking down the street. You walk towards the fireman, right?
That's correct.
He's told that over and over and over again in that video, right?
That's correct.
Tell us why, right?
I'm sorry.
Tell us why you went down the street.
Okay. Yes, that's correct.
We see you going down the street, correct?
That's correct.
And then utilizing the read technique, you try and give him some alternatives, like a way out, so he admits that he went down the street, right?
That's correct. Options and themes.
Options and themes.
That's correct.
Like, hey, this is a horrible, horrible fire, but you may not be that bad of a guy. Maybe it was an accident, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
You suggest those things to him during the course of both of those interviews,
That's correct.
right? You say to him, maybe it wasn't an intentional killing of people, right?
That's correct.
Because you're trying to ease his mind so he tells you that he went down there and started it, correct?
That's correct, but it also is a possibility.
Okay. Well, utilizing the read technique, you're utilizing these things because the read technique teaches you to do that, right?
Well, there's always more than read. It's my experience as well as you said.
Okay,
And
fair enough.
Just having a conversation.
All right. Maybe it just got out of hand, you tell him, right?
I did, yes.
Maybe it was provoked by the actions of somebody else. Maybe they said some nasty words to you. Remember telling them that?
Yes.
All right? In other words, maybe the people at 693 got out of hand themselves, and those people are responsible for getting you all fired up to get you down the street to set this fire, right?
That's correct. We were trying to establish why it happened, or what was the reason for those actions.
Maybe you just went down the street to take a look, because you're trying to get him down the street, right, with his own words.
Well, we were trying to understand why he was down there.
You told him, we see you walking down the street, right?
That's correct.
You told him, maybe you just went down to take a look, Stanley, right?
That's correct.
As you're telling him that, you're saying, man, this is a family of 7. There's 5 babies here, right?
That is true.
You telling him, you're trying to play on his emotions, right?
I'm trying to find out why this occurred.
You said you are having a hard time sleeping yourself.
And that was correct.
You said that you've got to answer to the families and give them information, right?
That is correct.
Help me out, man, right?
That's correct.
Maybe you just went down to look, right?
Yes.
You suggest to him that maybe he started this fire not because he wanted to hurt anybody, but because of maybe some beef he had with them, that maybe he just wanted to scare him out of the neighborhood, right?
That's correct.
These themes occur throughout your interrogation of Mr. Ford on both the 18th of May and on the 23rd of May. Is that fair?
That's correct. Yes.
Detective Bell tells him several times in that video clip, we see you, doesn't he?
That's correct.
Detective, during that conversation that we saw today on video, you also were asking him, hey, there was booms going on, and you're telling us you didn't hear anything, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you heard Officer Nemeth come in here this week and testify about his canvass of the area after the May 2017 fire, correct?
Correct.
And he showed us on that board on Exhibit 13 how he went down Fultz and talked to folks, correct?
Correct.
And he told us that he knocked on doors, people came to the door and said, I didn't hear or see anything, correct?
I believe he said some of the doors he knocked on, yes.
Yes. So my point is there were other people in the neighborhood on Fultz, even closer to where Mr. Ford lived on Hillcrest, who also told the police they didn't hear or see anything when it happened, correct?
That's correct, but there was also Shakir Richardson that did hear the bones. That don't rest.
I understand there were some, but
Yes.
my point is there are other neighbors that didn't hear anything. They slept right through it.
That's correct.
You say to him on May 18th in the car, did someone say something out the way? You remember that?
Yes.
And Detective, I know you have the transcript in your ROI, so if you want to look at it or tell me where, just ask me and I'll tell you.
Okay, sure.
All right, page 102, I believe.
Okay. Okay, I have 102.
Give me 1 second. Me?
Yep.
So Detective, just so we're clear, the prosecutor just asked me, I said, right now I'm gonna ask you about things you said to Stanley, okay?
Okay, I'm not sure if that's the right page, but yes.
All right, and I might be wrong, but I don't want you to tell us necessarily what Stanley said. I'm asking what you had maybe said to Stanley. I want you to either confirm or deny you said it. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay, and that'll go for this line of questioning right now. I guess I should have my report with me. Yeah, yeah, right. I'll try and get through these as efficiently as possible.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's page 103.
Okay.
I apologize to the prosecutor and to you. You say, I'm going to say, that if we can do it this way, I'll say it. If it's wrong, you tell me, okay?
Okay.
You say, did someone say something out of the way or something? You see that?
Yes.
What does that mean, to someone say something out of the way?
Something you didn't like or something that was inappropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and that would be, like I was saying earlier, right? Did somebody say something to him to upset him, right?
That's correct.
You're asking him that question because you're trying to give him not a way out of the whole matter, but an explanation for why he would have gone down there, correct?
I want to know if that happened, yes.
Okay. All right. On page 112,
Okay. Okay.
you talk about, hold on one second. I should have done a better job noting my file. Okay, middle of the paragraph, middle of the page. I need you to help me out because I haven't really slept well. I'll be honest. I'm not giving you a game or a speech, right?
That's correct, yes.
All right. You're trying to play on his sympathy for you at that point to get you to tell him that he went down the street, correct?
Not playing sympathy. I was telling him I'm being straightforward. I need him to be straightforward with me. I wasn't giving him a game or meaning I wanted him to talk to me. Let's be straightforward. Straight up.
On page 117,
Okay. Okay.
you say, listen to what I am saying. Police always get the facts. And we know what happened, but we don't always know why. Those babies are gone, man, 10-month-old. Maybe you were just trying to get people to move, right?
I see everything, but maybe trying to get people to move. I don't see that in that portion, but that's correct.
Okay. You're telling him the police always have it right, right?
I'm telling him the police always get the facts of what happened.
Okay.
So we always know what happened,
But
trying
you-
to establish the why.
Well, but the truth is, the police always don't get the facts, do they?
We get the facts of what happened, what took place, because we respond after it happens. And then we investigate.
police don't solve every crime, do they, Detective?
Not necessarily, no. No, they do not.
You tell them on page 118, I'm not judging you, I need you to help me.
That's correct.
You also tell them, how would you feel if it was your family, right?
That's correct.
Playing on his sympathies again, right?
And I wanted to know how he would feel if it was his family.
Because you're playing on his sympathies because you want him to tell you that he went down the street, correct?
I wanted to know how he would feel.
You tell him people
That
died,
was his-
Stanley.
Yes, I did. Yes.
It's page 119. People died, help me, Stanley, right? Help me out.
I recall asking him that, but I don't see it on that page, 119.
Okay. Page 120.
Okay?
You tell Stanley, I just want to know this. Could it possibly be this? I have been praying on this. God is my witness. I need closure to this. Anything can be forgiven, but may not be forgotten, but I need you to tell me. Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I need you to help me, and you seem like a good dude. I respect you, you're telling him, right?
Yes.
But I need you to tell me why. You told me that you didn't come in or go out, correct?
Correct. Is this still page 120?
Yes.
I do remember asking him that, but I don't see it here verbatim on that. But
Can I approach?
sure. Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Sorry. Yes.
No, it's fine.
You have different pages than I have.
Well, this appears to be,
Okay, yes, that's paragraph 2.
Okay, so for the record, so I don't look like I'm absolutely completely nuts, our pages seem to be off, correct?
A little bit, yes.
Okay, but you did say that to him, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right, and when you tell him, I just need to know why, one of the investigative techniques or read techniques utilized by law enforcement is, we already know you did it. We just need to know why, right?
That is a question that I would like to know, and I'm sure the jury would like to know, and that is separate from Reed. I don't believe it states that in the Reed protocol.
You're not answering my question, Detective.
Okay.
One of the things you do in order to get him to confess, whether it's Reed or not, is you tell him, we already know you did it. We just want to know why.
I said I believe we already know what happened, but I want to know why.
And what you're saying is, when we already know what happened, you're telling him that you believe he did it.
Are you asking him? I'm sorry, is that a question? Or?
That's what you're telling him when you say that, are you not?
What I'm telling him is, we know what happened, the facts of what happened. We know that 7 people died. I was asking him, tell me why. I wanted his words of why.
That's part of the technique used to give him an out where it happened for a different reason, right?
No, that's not correct. I wanted to know the actual why, why it happened from him.
Well, in order for him to tell you why, you would have to assume that you knew he already did it.
That's not correct. I wanted to ask him and get his words of what he was going to tell us.
Well, if he didn't do it, how would he know why?
I'm sorry.
If he didn't do it, how would he know why?
That would be a question you'd have to ask him, I imagine. I asked him that.
I'm asking you. If you're
Okay.
talking to someone who did not commit the crime, how would they possibly know why the crime was committed?
Are you saying he did not commit it, or are you saying he did commit it? I'm not sure I understand your question.
If you are talking to somebody who's a suspect, and we've had several suspects in this case that you've interviewed, correct?
That's correct.
And you've cleared those and focused on Mr. Ford, correct?
That's correct.
And if you ask those suspects who you believe didn't do it, why did you do it? They wouldn't be able to answer because they didn't commit the crime, correct?
It depends.
You tell him on page 120, at least my 120, if it was maybe an accident, it got out of hand, it just went up and it was it became overwhelming. Do you remember saying that to him?
Yes.
You tell him on page 120, around 120, at least mine 120, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, you came in that house right before she called. You remember telling him that?
I don't see it on 120, but I do recall asking him that.
Okay. You go on, page 124, maybe it wasn't intentional. You're giving him another out, correct?
Okay, let me take a look at 124. Yes, that's correct.
You tell him on page 127, you're not telling me the truth, correct?
That's correct.
You tell him, you know we have a canine out here and it's highly trained, right?
That's correct.
You tell them the state fire marshal, the APD, the Akron Fire Department, arson investigators, the CSU unit, and other agencies that are here now, right?
That's correct.
You're trying to pressure in him to confess, correct?
That was actually the truth. All those agencies were present.
Right. But you're telling him that again, you're reiterating that because you want him to confess, am I right?
Partially, yes, but I wanted him to know it's not just myself. It's a collaborative effort.
You tell him on page 130, I'm telling you, we saw you in the door. I need you to help me with the reason, right?
That is correct.
You also indicate, as I had mentioned before, you gave him a reason that maybe you just wanted somebody out of the neighborhood.
I do recall asking him that, wanting them to move.
In other words, so you didn't set the fire because you really wanted to hurt anybody, Stanley, but we know you set the fire, and maybe it was because you just wanted to get people out of the neighborhood.
Yes, that could have been an option.
You tell him, you're talking to Stanley now, page 130, I have worked a lot of cases and people have told me it was an accident and it got out of hand, right?
That's correct.
You're saying, so I've done these interviews before and people have told me, hey, this is an accident, right?
That's correct.
You're trying to ease his mind so he confesses to you, aren't you?
That's correct.
Then you say to him, on page 132, if you didn't do it, then maybe you know who did do it, right?
That's correct.
Because what you're trying to do there is you're trying to get him to talk about the incident, to connect himself to the incident and his knowledge of the incident, because that gets you halfway home if you get that done, doesn't it?
That's correct.
Then you start talking about maybe you just went down the street to take a look, right?
That's correct.
Because now, because he's up to this point, he has denied it repeatedly, correct?
Yes.
And now you're just trying to get him up the street towards 693 Fultz, because that would be something that would help you convict him as well, correct?
That's not totally correct. We actually witnessed an individual going down there and he admitted that it was him on video.
You've told him over and over and over again, we see you on video walking up the street, don't you?
Yes.
The truth is, Detective, when you look at that video, you can't discern who that individual is by looking at their face on that video, can you?
Not by face, but by travel, location, path to and from, and all the other factors that come into play.
Which you've testified to in this case and had people testify to, right?
That's true.
People
yes.
running from certain places to behind houses or into cars and things of that nature, correct?
From his actual residence, his mother's residence, to and from the fire.
Yeah.
Yes.
Your opinion, right?
He also admitted that was him. Yes.
That he was running to and from the fire?
He said he was walking or jogging, but he came from that direction.
All right, guess we'll let the jury decide that.
Absolutely.
You tell him, what should I tell the family that calls me about their family members, right?
Yes, sir.
Playing on his emotions again to try and get him to confess, correct?
No, sir. There was no playing with his emotions. In that context, we actually talked with both families, and I wanted to give them a valid reason for why this happened. There was no playing with that. That was the truth.
Detective,
Talk with all the families.
the truth of the matter is, you reviewed the videos before you talked to him, correct?
That's correct.
You looked at photographs before you talked to him, correct?
That's correct.
You didn't share any of those videos or photographs with him, correct?
That's correct.
You repeatedly, along with Johnny Bell, told him that you saw him going down the street, correct?
That's correct.
And you're telling this jury that all the video that you reviewed and all the evidence we heard in this case, you tell them, that tells me that's Stanley Ford, correct?
That tells us an individual went to and from 1374, armed, disarmed their alarms, went to the fire, ran from the fire back to his two residences, and came in his home where he lives.
And if you got all that, Detective, why do you spend approximately 5 hours trying to get him to tell you that that's him?
The interview was actually a little over 2 hours, but we actually continued to talk with him, and we would still have talked with him longer if needed.
Why did you continue to press him and tell him you saw him on video? Now, and it wasn't just 2 hours, it was an hour and a half on the 18th, correct?
That's correct.
It was also time on the 17th, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And it was chained to a table in an interrogation room of the Akron Police Department, correct?
That's correct.
For
Yes.
over
Yes.
2 hours at that time, correct?
Yes.
If you had this great video evidence that led us all to conclude it was Stanley Ford, why did you have to continue to press him over and over and over again and tell him things that you saw that you truly didn't?
When we're interviewing persons of interest, we want to get as much details, as much of their story, their words that they're going to tell us. We had video evidence, correct. We had information, and as you all seen video coming to and from the fire location back to the residences, we also and always give the party or suspect a chance to tell us why. I'm not going to deny Mr. Ford a reason to tell us why someone's coming from, or an individual's coming from his home to the fire back to his home, because he was not being truthful.
You gave him plenty of opportunity to interview him like 5 times, right?
That's correct.
And repeatedly he told you, I did not start this fire, did he not?
That is correct, and he mentioned some other things as well. He finally admitted that it was him on video after denying it, saying he was sleeping.
Well, you promised him you had him on video, didn't you?
Yes, I did, and we actually did.
And when he did that, you had him chained to a table, didn't you?
It's handcuffed to the table.
And you already told him that he was being charged with the aggravated murder of 7 people on that day, did you not?
That's correct. He was in custody at that time, yes.
So you had already made your decision prior to talking to him that he was being charged with these aggravated murders.
Yes and no, because we talked to him on the 17th and 18th, and then on the 23rd as well.
I'm talking about the 23rd now.
Yes, sir.
When he sits there on the 23rd, right?
Yes.
And you say he says he went up, he went outside and went up the street, right?
Yes.
You had told him already he was charged with aggravated murder, didn't you?
Yes.
And Johnny Bell repeatedly told him that we see you, Stanley, don't you?
That's correct.
Can I have a moment, Judge?
You may.
Detective, I apologize for getting a little animated.
No problem, sir.
Sometimes I get a little passionate. I don't have any other questions for you at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. LaPrince, redirect.
Thank you, Judge.
Detective Looney,
Yes.
if all you had to do was play on somebody's sympathy in order to get them to confess to a crime they committed, would you do it?
Yes.
If all you had to do was make them feel bad about a crime they committed, would you do it?
Yes.
If all you had to do was lie to somebody to get them to confess to killing 7 people, would you do it?
Yes.
You ever heard that expression, you got to speed to catch a speeder?
Not exactly.
Okay. Mr. Gorman asked you why you would interview him if you had such great evidence.
Yes.
Do you always just stop at a certain point of your investigation when you think that's all you need?
Of course not. We always continue.
You're not the trier of the facts, right?
That's correct.
These fine folks are.
That's correct.
Do you ever know when enough's enough?
Really, you can never have too much evidence. You can never have too much effort because there's no perfect investigation, but you continue to go as needed and you continue to investigate. Things evolve, new evidence. People become aware of information and report things later. People feel remorseful and confess or want to tell the truth. We don't always get the truth from everybody.
And isn't it fair in all the years since these have happened, there has been additional calls even within the last year about this case?
Yes.
And do you follow up on those?
Yes, we do.
What did you need? Your mask.
I don't want to be.
Now I've infected it.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. And all those techniques that Mr. Gorman presented you with,
Yes.
and I know he had a list of them,
Yes.
all those techniques are legitimate, Supreme Court approved techniques.
Overruled. You may answer.
To use in an interview of a suspect.
Yes.
I'm going to skip around just a little bit because Mr. Gorman talked and asked you lots of questions, and so I'm just going to try and follow up on some things, okay?
Okay.
So bear with me. There was some conversation about Mr. Ford's son, Stanley Mitchell.
Yes.
And this, I guess the suggestion is that he might have been the one to do this.
That's correct.
What evidence did you have that Stanley Mitchell committed this crime?
We had no evidence that he would have committed this. His physical appearance is different from the individual in the video. Weight is about 130 pounds. He's about 6 foot, but slender build.
And was there any evidence that he had any issues with either the Lindell Lewis and Gloria Hart or the Huggins Boggs family?
No, not to my knowledge, no.
And the suspicion of Mr. Mitchell was related to, well, strike that. What does the word complicity mean in your world?
Complicity is like an accomplice, a person that assists, aids, or abets, or takes part in an actual crime that occurred.
And did you, when you talk about Mr. Mitchell being a suspect in this case, were you thinking he was the primary person who set the fires or an accomplice?
Potential accomplice for the 2016 fire.
And who did you believe who he would have been accomplice to?
Possibly the party inside the vehicle driving that first individual moving from 719 back to the street direction, or
No.
toward the vehicle.
No, I'm sorry. My question was, is who would he be helping?
Potentially Mr. Ford's father.
And that's why he was a suspect.
That's correct.
However, you didn't arrest him, did you?
No, we did not.
Is it fair to say that, and we've already talked about the fact, you are not the trier of the facts in this case, right?
Yeah, let me ask a question, sustained. Ask a question.
Are you the trier of facts in this case?
No.
Okay. However, when you do an investigation, you obviously have to have opinions. Is that fair?
That's fair, yes.
And at some point in time after reviewing the evidence you had in regarding the videos, what was your opinion as to who, and I don't mean the name of the person, but on the video, did you come up with an opinion as to whether the person you were seeing in the video was the person that set the fires?
Objection.
Oh, yeah, you may.
Mr. Gorman, your objection is sustained. Mr. LaPrince, you may proceed and rephrase.
Detective Looney, during your investigation, did your investigation lead you to believe that the person running from 693 Fultz Fire was the person who set the fire?
Yes.
And so when you conducted your investigation with that belief, who are you trying to identify then?
We were trying to identify the individual that was leaving from 1374 Hillcrest, 1370 Hillcrest, going towards the fire, running back to those locations, setting the alarms, disarm, before and after, and then going into 1370 into the side door there, 1370 Hillcrest.
So based on your belief from your investigation that the actual person, that the person in the video running from the fire doing these activities, if you could identify that person, you would know who set the fire?
Yes.
Mr. Gorman asked you about the black vehicle in front of, or across the street from 1374 Hillcrest. Remember that?
Yes.
And he showed you that report, which indicated that there was a call made, and that was in relation to Mr. Ford telling you that he had called about that.
Yes.
And it said anonymous.
Yes.
And Mr. Gorman then asked you, well, isn't it fair to assume that it came from 1374, it was Mr. Ford? And you said yes, correct?
Yes.
But who are you assuming set the alarm at 1374?
The key holders, the people who the people who actually had access and were on record as being the key holders.
And that would also be a fair assumption, wouldn't it?
That's fair, yes.
So with that opinion in your mind that you, not opinion, that the belief that you had that the person in those videos was the person who set the fire, did any of that information in your investigation lead you to believe that Mr. or Anthony would be the individual going into those homes or setting those or setting the alarm?
No.
Was there anything in your investigation that would suggest that Thomas Hughley and the other fires, Thomas Hughley's drug dealers or Ronald Garrett's drug dealers were in Mr. Ford's home?
No.
Did you ever find any connection between any of these individuals and Mr. Ford?
No, I did not.
Other than Stanley Mitchell?
That's correct. Yes, it being his son. I can't see the board, so
It's okay.
I do recall.
And the individuals in the Circle K truck, was there any information you received to lead you to believe that any of those individuals were entering into the homes at 1370 or 1374?
No.
As a matter of fact, you questioned Mr. Ford about who could possibly be in his home during those periods of time.
Yes, I did.
And he told you?
No one, not to his knowledge.
Mr. Gorman asked you if you had searched any of the other homes in the area or of other suspects other than Mr. Boggs, correct?
That's correct.
We also talked about, and he also asked you about the fact that you had to go through a legal process and get a judge to approve that, correct?
That's correct.
And in order for him to do that, he asked you about you had to have some probable cause or some basis for that.
That's correct.
Did you believe in your training and experience that you had any probable cause or belief, reasonable belief, that would get you a warrant to search any other residents in that area?
No, we did not.
Now, Detective Looney, today you heard testimony, or you've heard testimony, and you have testified about Mr. Boggs, correct?
Yes.
And I think everybody in this room agrees that Mr. Boggs is not a nice man.
That's correct.
And is it fair that Mr. Boggs was a prime suspect in your investigation?
Yes.
So you had this, ex-husband, right? The husband always did it, right? Or the spouse always did it, right? That's what we always hear.
I've heard that before.
Okay. So you have that. You have an ex-spouse, correct?
Yes.
We know he doesn't like her enough that he is trying to set her on fire.
Yes.
And the cause of the deaths in this case is fire.
Yes.
And then you have information that he confessed.
Yes.
So why isn't he in this chair? You had a confession and a prior history. Why isn't he in that chair?
We were able to follow up on the statements made about the confession and the method used. We were able to eliminate that and verify or determine whether that was credible. That statement was not credible because the fire was caused by a flash, not by charcoals. The patterns associated with the fire as well was not consistent with charcoals being placed into a container. There was no grill on the porch, and we know the fire started outside the home. And also we were able to eliminate Mr. Boggs through checking of cell phone records, tower information, excuse me, locations. The towers give you the location of the movement of the devices for the digital forensic element. Also, we checked video in Ravenna at his apartment complex, showing his vehicle never left that location. We watched for hours that video, showing the truck never left. We initiated a search warrant of his home and his truck and vehicle for items we seized and collected items. They were also tested with fire marshals in association, and I believe there were no accelerants from the items there. We also I also interviewed Mr. Boggs on multiple occasions. Myself, Detective now Lieutenant Lickey, and the Sergeant Butler from the police department were able to eliminate Mr. Boggs. And Mr. Boggs had no access that I'm aware of to 1374 or 1370 Hillcrest, no access to alarm codes or key codes. He was not a key holder registered, and I found no connection between Mr. Ford and Mr. Boggs.
And did you also learn through your investigation that there was a newspaper article in the Beacon Journal about this case?
Yes.
And that article came out on what day?
That article was published May 17th. We interviewed Mr. Boggs on the 15th and on the 19th, and we didn't receive the initial report from the jailhouse contact or the deputies until the 21st, but we had already interviewed, again, Mr. Boggs on two previous occasions. The article also gave that similar information about the charcoals being placed into a container or trash, and that was not consistent with what we knew, the origin of the fire, where it started, and how it started.
All right.
It was a flash versus charcoals that would have smoldered.
And did you also determine in your investigation that the inmates at the Portage County Jail where this individual was located had access to the Beacon Journal?
Yes.
Detective, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Detective
Oh,
Looney.
I'm sorry, Judge, wait a minute.
Oh,
I think I forgot to do something.
oh, you did. Is that what you wanted?
Yes.
Okay.
Detective, we just did talk about the article. I'm going to show you what Mark states 170. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
This is a copy of the page from the Akron Beacon Journal article that was mentioned, dated May 17th, 2017, sir.
I was going to say, you need my glasses? Okay.
I need a magnifying glass.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Judge, I have no recross, thank you.
You may step down, Detective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on a second.
No, that's okay, just give me 1 second.
Can we just have, I'm sorry.
Clearly.
Additional time.
Our next witness.
Your Honor, at this point in time, based on the state of the evidence, the state of arrest.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the state of Ohio's case. We're going to go ahead and take our afternoon break. There's some things that the attorneys and I have to discuss on the record. And then when we come back, we'll give you some additional information. So remember the admonition I've given you at all breaks. Do not discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Do not let anyone else discuss it with you, including family, friends, or the media. You must not post or read anything about this case, either through a broadcast, on the internet, through any electronic device, including your cell phone. Any such discussion, if discovered, could lead to a mistrial, which again would severely compromise the party's right to a fair trial. Do not permit anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. And just because you've heard the state's case does not mean that you should form or express an opinion until the case has finally been submitted to you. We're going to need to take a little longer of a break. It's 5 after 2. If you'll be back in the jury room at 2:30, we'll proceed at that time. Thank you.
All rise, please.